Welcome to round 4 of the Parenting Roundabout podcast for the week of February 7th. I'm Terry Morrow, and I'm here with Nicole Eridix.
Hello.
And Catherine Haleko.
Hello.
As moms of teens and young adults, we've survived those little kid days, yet we're still rethinking the decisions we've made all through our kids' lives and worrying about what's going on right now. Today's Thursday, which means it's time to give into our obsessing. And today we're obsessing about an article saying that as much influence as we think we have on our kids, they may have more on us. Nicole, what was this all about?
Yeah, it was a nice, I shouldn't say nice. It was an interesting article, but it was interesting. It was pleasant to read. That basically discussed that as much as parents have influence over their children, that the children actually also influence who we are as people and parents naturally, right? But it was just a different perspective on parenting, which was really interesting. And it had several points that I could totally relate to in terms of, obviously how kids change your day-to-day behavior, for example. And I can relate to one of the examples in this article. I didn't drink coffee until I had my first child.
Huh.
And then I was so sleep deprived, I started drinking coffee. Like it was not part of my repertoire of food. But then, it went on to state some studies actually that do prove that, or the research shows that a child's behavior had a much stronger influence on their parents' behavior than the other way around, which is kind of interesting because they went on to say how a child's, their personality and their likes and dislikes, etc., influences how we parent our children. So it's kind of, we think we have the influence over them, but it's actually we're responding to them.
Yeah.
So it's very
true.
interesting. And then how, of course, how do parents respond to that? Do some lean into that and are responsive, or do others withdraw and stick to their perceived notion of what parenting should be? So it's a really interesting read. I'm not being very succinct about it, but I think it's really, it basically kind of builds on this premise that children have a tremendous amount of influence over parents when, here we are thinking that we're the ones
that we're in charge.
We're in charge, and we're
guess what? No,
lo and behold, we're not. So, yeah.
I often tell my daughter now, where we are two old people and two young adults living in the same house, that, when you have four adults living in the house, sometimes you have to adjust your behavior to other people, or sometimes you have to accept other people where they are and just, it's not going to change. People are who they are. And when you think about it, it's really that way when your kids are little too. You think that, okay, we're the parents, we're in charge, we make things happen, and our kids are, ours to mold, but it's really not. They have their own personalities. They have their own strengths and weaknesses, and you wind up changing in response to them as much as they wind up changing in response to you. So it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
But I like the message it sends is that it's important to be attuned to your child's personality and their wants and needs, because but at the same time, still guiding them, right?
Right.
And still, creating those kind of supports around them. Because if you've grown up with a parent who isn't attuned to your needs, it's really challenging. Like it sucks.
Your needs to not eat vegetables.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I really like the article. It definitely speaks to my parenting style and how I'm trying to parent my kids. But
It's a hard line to walk, though, sometimes between the appreciating your kids and also guiding them. Sometimes you want them to be a little, I don't know, not a little less the way they are, but to still do things that they need to do.
Right.
I had two very different kids in that way. Both of them had disabilities, but my daughter seemed much more capable of being capable. And so I would push her and she seemed to respond well to that. Whereas with my son, it was clear that certain things stressed him. And so you had to be a little more creative and you had to sort of work around things. And I was much more willing to say, let him be in, a self-contained classroom so that he did not have to spend all his energy on his behavior and could learn better. So I felt like I was much more creative with him and much more, hey, you can be just like I was with my daughter. And in both cases, I wonder if that was the right approach. Maybe I should have done things differently. Certainly, there were many learned educators who told me I should be doing things differently, but it seems to have worked out okay. I don't know. But I did I could not take the same approach with each one of them.
Right.
And so that made me more flexible and more creative in how I parented. I'm somebody who usually likes things the way I want them and don't have a lot of patience with things not being. And I had to definitely move out of that a little bit. Now that I'm old and they're adults, I'm moving back in. I still want things the way I want them to be. Children, you're old enough now. But when they were young, I had to acknowledge that such was not the case.
Yeah. I mean, I think a big part of this is just like, you can have all kinds of beliefs and plans before you have kids about how you're going to do things. But number one, you've never done it before, so you don't know. And number two, you don't know your particular kid until they're there in front of you.
And then you're like, oh.
You're like, oh, this is not going to work the way I was parented or the way I parented their sibling or whatever else.
Yeah, it's an adventure.
It is. A never ending, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Also, along the lines of what you were saying about coffee, Nicole, in response to one of my kids, I stopped drinking. Most parents would say they started drinking because one of the kids.
Oh gosh!
We adopted a kid with fetal alcohol syndrome, and then felt like it was kind of bad to have a box of the thing that broke his brain in the closet. So,
True.
We both just said, neither my husband or I drank that much. Me because I'm a lightweight and I could never drink that much anyway. And he just was sort of, he could take it or leave it. So it wasn't hard, but that was really a big change. I go to the doctor now and I could say, no, I have not drank for this many years because this is when we decided that was not appropriate. So, and that was a good change. I like that change. Yeah. I'm glad for that change. I do not resent it. Coffee might've been harder, but no,
I thought this article was going to be like, I became someone who cares about dinosaurs or, NASCAR or whatever it was that, you have how you get into the stuff that your kids are into, or you learn skills that you never thought you'd learn, like how to put on goalie pads or, put your kid's hair in a bun that won't move for 14 hours. Like I sort of thought that's what the article was going to be about. So it was not that.
No.
No, it's a good read. It definitely made me think, how we kind of got this narrative all wrong.
Yeah. Another time we should have the discussion of, how did your kids' schooling changed you? Because
yes.
I definitely changed over the course of advocating for 2 kids through 12 years of special education.
Yeah.
So, not necessarily the better, but, you do what you got to do. But that changed me to be the
definitely. Well, hey,
obnoxious person I am now.
One major way in which they've changed us is that we wouldn't have this podcast without them. So
that's right.
Or we'd have to give it a different name.
Or talk about different things. So yeah, that's kind of a positive change, because I enjoy sharing this, or being a part of this podcast, and I hope our listeners enjoy listening to it. Yay! So that's it for today's round 4. Tune in tomorrow when we'll share a roundabout roundup of things that we've been using or enjoying lately that we think deserve a shout out. Find all our episodes at parentingroundabout.com and talk back in the comments there, on our Facebook page, or on Twitter, where you will find us at Roundabout Chat.